Andrei Konchalovsky's troublesome action movie was released in 1989. Despite being poorly received by American audiences, Tango Cash became a huge hit overseas. Not as huge as Commando or Universal Soldier, but it was definitely up there in the rankings. It was supposed to be a regular action movie with a maximum budget of $35 million. However, it absorbed $55 million, making it one of the top 10 most expensive movies in history at the time. With inflation in mind, the amount won't seem so surprising, but the fact remains. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, released around the same time, cost nearly $10 million less. Back to the Future Part 3, released 6 months after Tango Cash, had a $40 million budget. The first problem the studio and producers faced was Patrick Swayze's departure from the project. Swayze was supposed to play Cash, but changed his mind at the last minute when he saw the script for Roadhouse. It's difficult to say why he liked the Roadhouse script so much. The reason could be that in Roadhouse, Swayze was the main character, whereas in Tango Cash, he would have to be in Sly's shadow. Luckily, within a week, the filmmakers managed to secure a deal with Kurt Russell, who at that time was just as famous as Swayze. But the movie's good fortune had run out, and problems began to multiply quickly once filming began. Sylvester Stallone didn't like the script, so he started to revise it during filming. When Sly could no longer edit the script on the fly, he invited Jeffrey Boehm, who wrote the scripts for the first 2 movies in the Lethal Weapon series. Originally, Lethal Weapon was supposed to be a more brutal and bloody movie, but Boehm transformed it into an action comedy. Stallone wanted something similar for Tango Cash. Somewhere around that time, Sly had a conflict with the movie's director of photography, Barry Sonnenfeld. Allegedly, Sonnenfeld ignored Stallone's advice and requests when setting up the lighting and camera. According to Stallone, though, he fired Sonnenfeld because he simply wasn't good enough. He was replaced by Donald Thorin, who later worked on Scent of a Woman and Shaft. Sonnenfeld's dismissal paved the way for a successful career, as he directed Get Shorty and Men in Black in the mid-90s. Midway through filming, director Andrei Konchalovsky and producer John Peters came into conflict. At some point, the situation grew so tense that Konchalovsky was forced to leave. He was replaced by director Albert Magnoli. According to Konchalovsky, he was fired because he insisted on making the movie more serious. Producer John Peters didn't like that, because he wanted it to be a comedy. There are also rumors that he had a conflict with Stallone too, but Konchalovsky denies them. He claims that he and Sly remained on good terms, and that they had no problems on set. It's not surprising that many believe Stallone played a role in Konchalovsky's dismissal. The actor was notorious for constantly pestering directors with his advice. Perhaps he thought he knew how to shoot better, because he frequently directed himself. His only competitor in this could be Kevin Costner, another big fan of advising everyone. The situation was actually quite strange. The studio invited Konchalovsky to direct Tango Cash after his work on Runaway Train. Runaway Train didn't do that well at the box office and wasn't a big hit, but it received widespread critical acclaim and several Oscar nominations. And it certainly wasn't a comedy. In other words, Konchalovsky was hardly a good choice for a movie like this. Obviously, Konchalovsky's plan for Tango Cash was different, because it was not supposed to be a comedy. It was supposed to be a brutal and gritty action movie about 2 police officers who ended up in prison. The direction changed after filming had already begun. Seeing the success of comedies like Die Hard and Lethal Weapon, Stallone wanted to star in something similar. Now, it is hard to say how things would have turned out if Konchalovsky had remained in charge and produced the movie the way he saw it. Tango Cash was a movie that many people enjoyed watching over and over. Perhaps things wouldn't have turned out so well in different circumstances. In fact, after Konchalovsky's dismissal, the movie had 3 more directors. While they were searching for someone to replace Andrei Konchalovsky, Peter MacDonald took over the producer's chair. He later directed Legionnaire and Rambo 3. Stallone also didn't sit around, and filmed scenes with his character while MacDonald was busy filming something else. The crew members could direct the rest of the movie themselves, but the studio had to comply with the Directors Guild requirements. This means that actors and producers couldn't fulfill the duties of a director during the filming process. Therefore, bringing in Albert Magnoli was a way to make it appear that everything was done legally. According to rumors, Magnoli mostly worked as a second-unit director. These are the guys who usually shoot the sunrise or busy traffic on the city streets. Simply put, they shoot scenes that usually fill in the gaps between more important scenes. None of this was good for the movie. The crew's lack of responsibility caused multiple accidents during filming. It was pure luck that no one was seriously injured in them. For example, during the filming of a scene with a prototype of the truck, the back of the vehicle caught fire more than intended, putting Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell's safety at risk. Russell came out unscathed, but Stallone, being closer to the fire, ended up burning off most of the hair on his head. All these factors resulted in an extra month of shooting. Because of constant script changes, the entire ending of the movie had to be reshot. Initially, the ending was smaller in scale, and didn't have all those races and machine guns. When the filming was finally finished, the studio management received the material and was horrified. Warner Brothers immediately removed Stallone and the rest of the team from the editing process. To save the movie, they hired Stuart Baird to edit it. During that time, Baird frequently acted as a savior. He later directed the movie's executive decision and U.S. Marshals. The studio wasn't satisfied with Baird's first edit, so he brought in Hubert de la Borderie, who had previously worked on The Witches of Eastwick, to help him. Together, they came up with an option that satisfied the studio. Allegedly, this happened just a week before the movie's release in American theaters. Despite its $55 million budget, the movie only grossed $64 million in theaters. Good sales on media at the time eventually helped the project bring in some profit. However, when it was first released, it was one of the year's biggest failures. By the way, years later, Stallone offered Kurt Russell a role in The Expendables. Russell declined, and the role was given to Bruce Willis. As officially stated, Russell no longer wanted to work on action movies. But there are rumors that Kurt Russell didn't enjoy working with Stallone on Tango and Cash, as he used his producing powers to constantly put his character in the spotlight. Sounds believable, considering that not that long ago, Russell starred in Fast and Furious and Guardians of the Galaxy, and he didn't seem to mind their action component.